picture this. It's 2015. A 14-year-old kid, super into engineering, brings a homemade clock to school to show his teacher. By the end of the day, he's in handcuffs. Why? Because that clock was labeled a bomb. This story, it's not really about a clock. It's about how a single word, a single label, can literally change everything. All right, let's get into it.
So this is the big question, right? Was he a budding engineer or a potential terrorist? I mean, you could argue the school was just being cautious, we live in a crazy world, or was a young Muslim kid singled out because of, well, who he was? This one case, this one clock, it opens up this huge conversation about deviance, power, and what justice even means.
And look how fast this all went down. I mean, it's just wild. What starts as this kid trying to show off his skills to a teacher, it just snowballs. Before you know it, he's interrogated, arrested, fingerprinted, mugshot taken, the whole deal. And yeah, the charges were eventually dropped, but the damage was done. That label, that suspicion, it sticks.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The family later sued, and their argument was simple. If a white kid had brought in the exact same thing, he would have been celebrated, right? Probably gotten an A for ingenuity. And that's the whole point. It was never really about the clock itself. It was all about the reaction to the person who made it.
So this whole story is a perfect way to jump into some really big ideas from sociology. We're going to break down two key theories that help explain not just what happened to this one kid, but the bigger picture of how our society decides who's good and who's bad.
Okay, first up, the power of a label. We're looking at something called social reaction theory, or as most people call it, labeling theory. This is all about the close-up personal view. What happens to an individual when they get slapped with a label like deviant or delinquent?
So what does that mean? Well, the theory basically says that no act, by itself, is automatically deviant. An act only becomes deviant when society, people in charge like teachers, cops, judges, reacts to it and sticks a label on it. It's the label itself that actually creates the problem.
And this quote from sociologist Howard Becker just nails it. Deviant behavior is behavior that people so label. Now, he's not saying the action itself is meaningless. What he is saying is that the real consequence, the deviance, is created by how we react to it. A clock is just a bunch of wires and a display, until someone in charge calls it a bomb.
This is such a key concept, the difference between doing a bad thing and becoming a bad person. So you have primary deviance. That's the first time you break a rule. You shoplift a book, you bring a weird-looking clock to school. It's just an act. It doesn't really change how you see yourself. But then there's secondary deviance. This is what happens after you get caught and get labeled. Suddenly, you're not just a kid who did something wrong, you're a thief or a troublemaker. And the scary part is, you start to believe it. Your identity changes and you start acting the part.
And once that label is on, man, the consequences just cascade. It's like a row of dominoes. First, the stigma. Then your own identity takes a hit. Doors start closing. School opportunities, jobs. You might start hanging out with other kids who've also been labeled. And pretty soon it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. Society said you were a delinquent, so you become one. It's a really, really tough cycle to break. So that raises a huge question, doesn't it? If these labels have so much power, who gets to hand them out? Who's making the rules to begin with? That's where we zoom out and look at our second theory, social conflict theory. This is the big picture, 30,000-foot view.
So this theory says, hold on a second, society isn't all one big happy family. It's more like a constant struggle between different groups with different levels of power. And the law, it's not some neutral, objective thing. It's basically a tool that the powerful, the haves, use to keep their advantages and control everyone else, the have-nots. I mean, just think about it for a second. The folks with money and political influence are the ones who get to write the laws, right? And so you see things like white-collar crime being treated very differently than, say, petty theft. The whole idea here is that the system isn't broken. It's actually designed to work this way, to keep the current power structure just the way it is. And here's a really powerful, concrete example of what that looks like. Look at the war on drugs. Research shows that even when drug use and selling rates are similar across racial groups, by the time they're 27, African Americans have over 200% greater odds of being arrested for a drug offense than white individuals. The behavior is the same, but the enforcement is totally different. So when you put it all together, what do you get?
Both of these theories, from the micro to the macro, are pointing to the same unsettling idea. Justice isn't always blind. Who you are, your race, your wealth, your social status, can sometimes matter more than what you actually did. The labels are applied unfairly because the rulebook itself might be unfair. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the problems, the power of labels, the inequality in the system. So, is there a better way? Is there another path forward? Well, that brings us to a really fascinating alternative: restorative justice. The whole goal of restorative justice is to completely flip the script. It's not about punishment. It's not about who wins or loses. It's about one thing: repairing the harm. It tosses out ideas like stigma and shaming and instead focuses on things like apology, healing, and bringing people back into the community.
And this chart really shows you the night and day difference. Our traditional punitive system asks 3 questions: what law was broken, who did it, and what punishment do they deserve? Restorative justice asks a completely different set of questions: who was harmed, what do they need, and who has the responsibility to make things right?
So this is the path we all know, right? The punitive one. A law is broken, someone is found guilty, they get punished, and then they're stigmatized, basically pushed out of the community with a label that can stick with them forever. But look at the alternative path. This is restorative justice. It starts by acknowledging the harm. Then it brings everyone to the table: the victim, the offender, the community. The focus is on repair, on making amends, and the final step, not isolation, but reintegration. It's about welcoming that person back. Accountability here isn't about suffering. It's about actively fixing what you broke. So we started with a story about a clock and ended up questioning the very nature of justice. We've seen how powerful labels and social structures can be in shaping someone's reality. These theories really challenge us to look past the action itself and pay more attention to our reaction. They suggest that maybe, just maybe, the best way to deal with crime isn't to create more outcasts, but to figure out how to restore the people and the relationships that were damaged. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. What if justice wasn't about winning or losing, but about healing?